Growing up on Long Island, 58-year-old Jake Burton Carpenter didn't expect to find himself pioneering a winter sport that barely existed when he was in college.
I was just young punk, and then all of a sudden I was like the father of snowboarding. But now they're starting to call me the grandfather of snowboarding as it goes on.
At NYU, Burton had been more interested in racetracks than ski slopes.
I wanted to become a thoroughbred racehorse trainer.
Disturbed by the sometimes harsh treatment of racehorses, Burton left his dream behind and took a job at a small investment firm in New York City that worked with startups.
I talked to a lot of entrepreneurs, and it was great hearing their stories. And I just kind of felt like, well, it's not that tough to run a manufacturing company or start one. And so I had this false sense of confidence.
Buried deep in his boyhood memory, he also had a product, or at least the makings of one.
I'd gotten exposed to the Snurfer as a toy when I was about 14 years old.
The Snurfer was a piece of plywood with a rope that kids surfed down a snowy hill. Burton loved the $10 toy and never forgot it.
Always in the back of my mind throughout all this stuff was, that's a sport, there's a sport there, and somebody's got to do it sooner or later.
A decade later, at age 24, Burton decided maybe he could be that somebody. Burton wanted to make a better board for surfing snow than the Snurfer was. But he was neither a designer nor a carpenter, but he tried anyway. I'd
be sitting there with like a jigsaw trying to figure out how to make a snowboard out of wood, and I was a loser in shop class, not a very hands-on, not an artisan or whatever, or a woodworker.
He looked to surfboards and skateboards for inspiration, even visiting a surfboard manufacturer in California for ideas.
I made over 100 prototypes of all different types of construction, and I ended up settling on skateboard construction, which was just a horizontal, like a piece of plywood, basically. It was laminated with a curve built into it.
Armed with a $100,000 inheritance from his grandmother, Burton decided to see whether there was a sport in snowboards after all.
I wanted to go pursue this thing and start making snowboards.
In 1978, he quit his job with the investment firm in New York City, moved to Londonderry, Vermont, and rented a barn for a workspace. Locals soon wondered just what the kid from New York was making in that barn.
It was right across the street from this general store, and there was like a little place for lunch, and people thought it was like some kind of a front. Like the locals, they thought, this guy's in, some kind of a front for like a drug thing or something.
With the help of friends and family, Burton started making 20 snowboards a day. The bigger challenge was getting people to buy them.
I would load up the station wagon with snowboards, go out and drive across New York State and New England and go visit shops and try to sell them.
Few showed any interest.
It was not happening. One time I went out, I don't know how many snowboards I had in the car, but I came back with more than I left with. Somebody giving them back.
By the end of the second year, Burton was on the brink of bankruptcy.
Numbers weren't working. There was just no money coming in the door.
He tried taking his snowboards to trade shows to drum up interest.
The sort of powers of skiing, the manufacturers and so forth, they didn't want us in the trade show. You couldn't go be at that trade show and sell snowboards. They weren't allowed in the building.
Burton was frustrated, unsure what to do next. He had already blown through every penny of his inheritance.
I can remember sitting on an airplane next to somebody and somebody saying, well, what do you do? And just making something up, because I didn't even want to explain.
Desperate, he decided to try advertising in the ski magazines, the ads inviting readers to call for a brochure about his novel product.
We'd send him a good brochure and an opportunity, with a mail order form, and then I would go to the post office and pray for those business reply envelopes to show up.
His prayers were answered with a slow but steady trickle of orders. With funds finally coming in, Burton began manufacturing and selling snowboard boots and bindings too, improving those as he had snowboards. Getting buyers interested in the boards was one thing. Getting ski resort operators to let boarders on their mountains was quite another. Most places banned them, regarding riders as renegades following a fad.
We'd be driving up to like little villages up, say, Bromley Mountain in southern Vermont, where you could drive sort of a quarter of the way up the mountain and then snowboard down the trails at night. I mean, we weren't allowed near the place in the daytime. We didn't even consider asking.
But eventually, Burton did exactly that. He went to resort owners, demoed his snowboards, and pleaded for snowboarders to have access. Most said no way. But in 1984, the manager at Stratton Mountain in Vermont went against the tide. He talked to the ski resort's owners about Burton and his snowboards.
nobody wants you on the hill, but nobody had a good reason not to have you on the hill, so I'm going to give you a chance.
Many resort owners, however, remained skeptical of the sport. So did many skiers. To overcome traditionalists,
they made a T-shirt that was so funny and was like, yes, I can turn right, yes, I can turn left, yes, I can stop this thing.
young skiers took notice of the unconventional snow sport and increasingly gave Burton's boards a try.
You just do a bunch of beginner skiers that had never done it. You know, people would just think it was a joke, and that was sort of where we were at. But then people just got better at it.
And bought more boards. 6 years after carving snowboards in the Vermont barn, Burton reached $1 million in sales. In 1984, shortly after Stratton Mountain opened its lift lines to snowboarders, Burton went to Europe, where the sport was gaining in popularity.
Europe was much more easier going about the whole thing, and they didn't really embrace it, but they said, yeah, sure, you know, if you want to go down the mountain, go, you know, whatever, go for it.
He found a private investor and contract manufacturer in Austria with the same attitude. Together, they began making snowboards for the European market. By the end of 1985, Burton's profits jumped to $5 million. But Burton and the sport of snowboarding were just out of the gate. In 1988, one of the first national snowboarding championships was held at Stratton Mountain. It would later become the U.S. Open, regarded as the most important competition in the sport.
People would all see the best riders in the world. They say, wow, you know, I didn't know that you could do that on a snowboard. And that had a lot to do with promoting the sport and educating people on what the sport was capable of doing.
It also gave the world a look at what Burton Snowboards was capable of accomplishing. By the early 90s, revenues at his company were soaring to well over $75 million a year. Millions were flocking to the sport as well. By 1998, snowboarding became an Olympic sport as boarders competed in the games in Japan. By 2002, it was a medal sport. The riders who took the gold were sponsored by Burton. Burton Snowboards was a worldwide force by the end of the millennium, responsible for nearly 30% of the market in some 33 countries. Today, Burton remains the industry leader in snowboarding, selling boards, boots, bindings, goggles, and an entire line of jackets and outerwear. Those boards retail from $300 to nearly $1,000 each. In 2011, the company reached nearly $500 million in revenue. Burton and his wife own their company still, and they oversee all of it.
Yeah, it should be good. It'll be a good look.
But Jake Burton's overwhelming focus remains where it's always been.
I snowboard 100 days a year. It's something I've done for about 15 years in a row. And once I can't go up to the mountain and ride 100 days a year, I don't have the passion to do that, then I probably shouldn't have my job.